Hello, ladies and gentlemen, everything in between. Welcome back to What's on the Playlist today. Today I'm going to talk about the debut album of Toad Wet Sprocket, Bread and Circus, an image of which you will see here. Much better image than I can usually find off my shoulder. So, this is the debut album of the band Toad the Wet Sprocket. They were an alternative band. They are an alternative band, although at this point they're broken up by now. Formed in the late 80s, a bunch of guys who met in high school. The youngest band member was like 15 when they started playing. They got together, started playing. They self-produced this album for like $695. It was originally only released as a cassette tape, and when they got a record deal, it was re-released as an album and a CD. And they released a cassette in 1988, I think, and the full album was released in 1989. The band's name, Toad the Wet Sprocket, is not a surprise to certain people, but because I enjoy it so much, I'm going to tell the history of it. Toad the Wet Sprocket, the band had heard it before. It was actually used by another band, but the band had broken up and it stopped using it, so it was open for taking. They just used it as a placeholder. They couldn't think of anything for a band name. They just kind of used it once, and they just kind of never stopped using it. It came from a Monty Python sketch. Eric Idle, who wrote the sketch, said, when he heard about it, he said, they were writing a stupid skit about rock musicians. Rex Stardust, lead electric triangle from the band Toad the Wet Sprocket, fell off the back of a motorcycle, that kind of, just wrote this string of stuff with bizarre sounding names. And Eric Idle said, I wrote this, I wanted to write this thing, a band name that was so silly that no one would ever use it. No one would ever conceive of using it. And I was driving down the highway and I heard it come across the radio. I was like, here's this new song by Toad the Wet Sprocket. I almost drove off the highway. So, yeah, they just kind of picked this up from a Monty Python sketch. And because I'm a Monty Python fan and I watched them on TV when they were on TV, as a British import, I knew the sketch. I knew when I heard them, I was like, I gotta find out what this band is like, because I knew where Toad the Wet Sprocket came from. The album itself only had 2 really singles released, Way Away and One Little Girl. They really only charted on alternative rock charts, which was mostly in those days, pretty much like college radio stations played alternative music in the late 80s and early 90s. Didn't really take off for a while, except for a few bands who made it big, like REM. Speaking of which, critics compared them for this release to REM very unfavorably. They said they lacked, the polish of, Peter Buck's guitar playing. They lacked the skill of Michael Stipe's, poetic writing. They were just kind of an REM ripoff band. So, being their debut album, didn't really fare that well, unfortunately for them. But it was popular enough that, they did eventually get other contracts. 10, that was short. I pretty much ran through everything I wanted to say. I can't believe I ran through it in less than 5 minutes. But being their debut album and not having any really strong songs on it, I guess there wasn't much to say, aside from the band's origins. I don't really know them well enough to get into like the details of how they met and stuff like that. I didn't really find anything extremely interesting, but it was just, guys who met, guys who started playing together. So as far as that goes, nothing too interesting, just ordinary guys met and started playing together. So I guess this is a short one. I love Toad the Wet Sprocket. Bread and Circus is not necessarily my favorite album of theirs, but it is their debut album, and I try to do these things in chronological order. So, as always, thanks for watching. As always, my stuff is crap. And until next time, good hunting.